Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? Welcome to another exciting new episode of Consult the Doctor, where we're going to consult the doctor about a number of pressing matters. Should I do the entire video like this, where every S I say is pronounced? That's a C, but it's pronounced like an S. Like this? That would become so obnoxious. Oh my god. Okay, let's quickly move on to this inane crap. From this inane crap. Because the questions are actually really good. Okay. Do nibs change over use? For example, do they become wetter, or is it the user adapting to the nib? The person who asked this question asked it in a very nuanced fashion and said, because some people say yes and other people say no. So what do you think? Here's what I think. I think that the story, and I think I've addressed this before, the story of nibs adjust to your handwriting is largely a myth. Because nib tipping is very hard and it would take a very long time to adjust to your hand. I do think what happens, and I seem to recall reading this on Richard Binder's website at some point, his opinion, famous pen repair person, he was of the opinion that it's more so that you as a user tend to learn a specific pen's idiosyncrasies, right? You learn that particular fountain pen you have to hold a little bit like this and then it writes better. You find its sweet spot better. So I don't believe that, because I know back in the day when I learned to write with fountain pens in primary school, we were all told no one can use your pen because it adapts to your handwriting and it'll be ruined if you let someone else use it. I think that is largely nonsensical. I haven't done the experiments, but I think that's largely nonsensical. I mean, we have pens from the 1900s that people buy and they can write with them without much issue. Having said that, I do think that certain things can happen. For example, when you think about what makes a nib wetter, one of the things that can make a nib wetter is the gap between the tines, the nib slit, becoming a little bit wider. Not quite like this, because then it is sprung and that actually makes a pen not write. But if that slit becomes a little bit wider, your pen becomes a little bit wetter. What can make that gap a bit wider? Pressure. So if you are someone who happens to write with quite a bit of pressure, maybe a little bit more pressure than you should with a fountain pen, I think it is definitely possible that you, by exerting that pressure, you open up the nib tines a little bit, and over time that nib will become a little bit wetter. You do need to use quite a bit of pressure for that, but in theory, I think that is a possibility. Okay. Other things, as I said, adjusting to your handwriting, that kind of stuff, I'm not sure if I really believe that. But I do think that you can get used to that pen. So that would be my answer. And specific people, again, if you have a heavier hand, I think it is more likely that you may adjust that nib a little bit. But most of the time, I do think that Richard Binder is absolutely correct. It is you as a user getting to know that pen and knowing that you have to use that pen in a specific angle or a specific little bit of rotation or whatever, and you just learn that is that specific nib's sweet spot and that pen needs to be used in that particular manner. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. The next question was something along the lines of, I purchased a Leonardo, the piston seal got stuck, what can I do? If I would have received $1 every time over the past little more than a decade, for the time someone asked me something along the lines of, I purchased this pen, it doesn't do X, what should I do now? I could buy a brand new car. Because I get that question multiple times a week through email, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, anything. My analogy is always this. If you purchase a car, you drive it away from the dealership, from the lot, whatever. It seems to be okay. But then as soon as you hit the highway, it completely breaks down. Would you contact a person on YouTube and say, how do I fix this car? Or would you take it back to the person who sold you that car and say, this car doesn't work? I think I would probably take it to the person who sold me that car and say, this car doesn't work. If you have purchased the pen and it doesn't write, it is too wet, it is too dry, it has a clip that's loose, it has a piston that doesn't function, the vacuum filler doesn't work, the converter doesn't fit, the converter leaks, it didn't come with part X that was supposed to come with it, there was a crack in the box, what I would say is, contact the person who sold you that pen and say, the pen doesn't write, the nib is too dry, the nib is too wet, the piston doesn't work, the vacuum filler doesn't work, the converter is too loose, the converter is too tight, the converter doesn't draw up any ink, there is a crack in the pen, there is a crack in the box, or any of these things. After all, that person sold you a pen that doesn't function. If a fountain pen does not write, it doesn't do the one thing that you purchased it for. I'm not upset, I'm just saying, that to me sounds like a logical course of action. Now, I know that in this case there was an issue because the person was quite far away, the purchaser was quite far away from the country where the pens are made. There was some issues establishing contact with the manufacturer. I understand all that, but at the end of the day, it is the duty of the manufacturer, if you've purchased it there directly, or the person who sold you the pen, to make sure that you are satisfied. If you are not, contact that person, have a communication, open communication, establish communication, communicate politely, but explain this is not working. And most of the time, your problem should then be resolved by them. And that's the end of the story, I would say. Okay. The third question, and this one I wanted to save a little bit of time for because I thought it was quite interesting. Given a fixed budget, would you purchase a Grail pen or fly to a pen show? Now that I think really is a very interesting question. And at the risk of sounding wishy-washy, I could definitely defend both viewpoints. He's always so wishy-washy. I know. That's why I try to make this clear. A Grail pen is a pen that you've wanted for sometimes a while, sometimes not so long, but it's your number one pen. You want that pen. You want to own that pen. And then you have the money and you purchase that pen. Provided that the pen doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, contact the manufacturer or the person who sold it to you, and then they can make things right. Okay? But assuming that it does work properly, you then get to enjoy the pen that you've wanted to have for a long time. It may be a disappointment, it may be better than you expected, it may be anything you ever hoped it would be, but that is a pen that should make you happy because you now have what you've wanted for typically a while, and even if you've only wanted it for one day, but if you get that and that is what you aspire to have one day, that should be very exciting. Having said that, going to a pen show can also be very exciting, but for a different reason. Depending on the size of the show, you will see a few hundred pens, you may see thousands of pens, you may see tens of thousands of pens if it's a really big show, and that can be a lot of fun. But a pen show is about more than that. It's also about the people that you meet, the interactions that you have, hanging out in the bar in the evening, chatting to other people who really like fountain pens, and establishing meaningful communication, and maybe running into the person who sold you a pen that ended up not writing and saying, hey, this pen doesn't write. And then they say, oh, come back tomorrow, I'll exchange it for you. Problem solved. Now, that is something that you should not underestimate. The fun part of the social interaction, right? You get to meet people. You get to meet people you may have communicated with on forums, or that you may have seen on YouTube, or that you have seen any other way, right? That can be very exciting. It's also possible that you find your Grail pen at a pen show, but maybe the idea was that you can't have both, that you cannot then purchase your Grail pen at a pen show. That would be a little sour, but that could happen. So I think it really depends on what you are looking for. If you want the social experience of being enveloped by the pen world, you want to experience people and meet people and say, oh, that's Father Kyle, oh, that's, yeah, and then you run into them and that's fun, and then you can chat with them, right? That can be a lot of fun. Hashtag meet Father Kyle, this should now be a thing. But he is actually really nice. Now, having said that, that is then a choice you make, that you want to experience that part of the pen world. But then, and I mean, I think I've done separate videos on this, so I don't want to like now go into too much detail, but a lot of pen shows are very vintage, like a lot of vintage pens, especially in Europe. So it depends a bit on what you want. But I cannot emphasize enough that it's the social aspect that makes pen shows, not just the large number of pens. So I do think that's important. Now, if you were to put a ballpoint to my head and would say, you're going to write with this for the rest of your life, unless you give me a clear answer, Grail pen or pen show, I would pick a Grail pen. And the reason for that is that for me, and I'm purely speaking for me, but please allow me a second to make this argument, because this has the potential to sound incredibly arrogant. It's not meant that way. If I get to a pen show, which doesn't happen very often because we're in a pandemic, but even before that, I don't always have time, given my work, to go to pen shows. If I go to a pen show, it is 99% social and 1% looking at pens. So think of all the time you have, and then consider that literally 99% is talking to people and 1% of my time is looking at pens. But that's because people recognize me and then they want to talk to me and they want to do that. And that's a great honor. So this is not meant in an arrogant fashion. This is not meant as a complaint. But I know I will not be looking at pens at a pen show. I will barely have time for that. For most people, things are very different, right? And you do get to look at a lot of pens, and you're going to also have interesting conversations with people. But so for me, I would rather purchase a pen that I really love than go to a pen show, not because I'm antisocial, not because I don't want to talk to any people, but simply because that is what a pen show is like for me. And given that you asked me this question, I assume you also wanted to have a clear answer from me beyond the general reasoning through I tried to do of what are the pros and, well, I didn't really get into cons. I guess I did. A Grail pen can be a disappointment, and a pen show can also be a disappointment. But at least there are a lot of like-minded people who make it most likely a lot of fun for you. I hope that's a clear answer, and one that you, I know that I didn't waste your time with. Okay, the final question is a completely personal one, and that's okay. It was asked very politely. Do you mind sharing why you don't consume alcohol? The shortest answer to that question is, I think this video has been a clear example. Look at what I am like under normal, sober circumstances, and then try to picture me having had a few too many. That's a short answer. A longer answer is, I have zero interest in drinking alcohol. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't find it pleasant. I don't find the experience pleasant. I don't find being tipsy or drunk pleasant. I've never been drunk. I've never been tipsy. But I already know, knowing myself, that is not for me. This is the way I am. I don't judge it. Do whatever you want, within reason. But I don't care for it. It's just not my thing. And that's perfectly fine. I don't enjoy that. I also don't enjoy wine. For example, people like wine tasting and all kinds of different things. That does not give me pleasure, but I have that with tea. I like to drink different kinds of black tea, loose leaf tea, experimenting with different kinds of tea. That gives me pleasure, but it doesn't have the alcohol content, so I never have a hangover. And I tend to save a lot of money not buying alcohol, I will say that. But having said that, that's it. I have nothing against it. I don't mind other people drinking. I don't mind other people drinking around me. I have no issues with that. It's just not a thing that gives me anything. And if something doesn't give you anything, why would you do it? So I hope that's a clear answer. It's a good question, a fair question, because I talked about this in one previous episode. I said something like, I don't drink. Well, now you know why. That's it. I hope this was useful. Please continue to leave questions. I will try to answer them as clearly as I can. And that's it. And if your pen doesn't work, send it back. Bye!